We are now going to a women's panel, right? And the women's panel's topic today, it's about amplifying women's influence. Guys, I know what amplify means. I'm sure everyone knows what amplify means, right? But I had to actually Google what amplify means, because I'm like, I know the word. I know what it means. It sounds like something like an elevation and whatnot, right? When I Googled it last night, it actually spoke to increasing the volume. So when we talk about amplifying women's influence, we're talking about increasing the volume where women in women's spaces, right? In your own influence. Whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are a social impact business, whether you are in corporate trying to climb the corporate ladder, whether you are an executive, but amplifying our influence in the spaces that we are in is very critical. And that is a conversation that we are going to engage on with the panelists, which I'm going to introduce to you shortly. Beautiful ladies, guys. I don't even know where to start. It's going to be a powerful panel. I'm going to start with Hetty, the entrepreneur. As South Africa's preeminent monetization expert, this lady has not only reshaped the landscape of business, but has also shared her unique strategies on esteemed platforms such as Forbes Africa. Heralded as South Africa's #1 monetization expert and coach, she has revolutionized the art, turning ideas into revenue streams, right? She is the author of the book, Monetize with Hetty, which is a 21-day guide that dwells into the psychology of monetization and impacts fundamental strategies for financial success. She is part of the 40 Under 40, Mail and Guardian Top 200 South African, Top 1,000 African Voices, Top 50 Thriving Female Founders, Entrepreneur of the Year finalist under the Women of Stature, and #1 business on Vusi Tembekwayo's mentorship program. Today we are joined by the amazing Hetty, the entrepreneur. Woo! Welcome. Zianda is from the Eastern Cape. She actually flew last night. She's a clinical psychologist with an experience in both private and public sector, and author of the book, which I'm about to read, guys. It's "You're okay, but the stuff that happened to you wasn't." The title of the book is "You're okay, but the stuff that happened to you wasn't." Right? And a senior PhD candidate at the University of Cape Town's Department of Psychology. Please welcome Zianda Mavumengwana. Andisa is a Chief People Officer at Float Pays. Her role is to provide strategic support to the executive teams, as well as accelerate human capital practices of the organization. She is passionate about building strategies and initiatives focused on solving business and people challenges. With over 15 years as an HR practitioner, spanning across financial services, consulting, digital media, and music, as well as fintech startups, having led teams across the African continent within the industry. Guys, we are carrying giants. We're talking about Africa. That's beyond boundaries. That is what we are here for, right? To look beyond. As a co-founder of the Women's Tech Connection, an ICT non-profit organization designed to give access and opportunities and learnings repository to women in the technology sector, she has been recognized by Cisco Global Connected Black professionals for her exceptional work in the advancement of women in technology. She is the CEO of Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, where she advocates for business environment conducive to enterprise creation and development. She's also the 40 under 40 in Africa. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Andisa Libas. How are you feeling?
Feeling good.
Feeling good. No pressure. I must say, you all look beautiful.
Thank you.
And thank you for honoring the invite. Thank you so much. I'll start with you, Zianda.
Okay.
Tell us more about you, the work that you've done, and the impact that you've done in the women's space.
Ooh, we're starting there.
Yes.
Good morning. I think it is still morning. Good morning. Lovely to meet all of you. As I've been introduced, my name is Zianda Mavumengwana, all the way from the Eastern Cape. I was born and raised in Tsomo, so that is where I spent the formative years of my life. Jetted off to PE for the first few of my qualifications, and I've been a PE person for the early start of my career as well. And then I decided to move to Mthatha. I don't know why I did that, but I did that.
It sounds like a regret. Going back, regress.
My motivations changed. I went to Mthatha for a reason, and the reason is no longer the incentive. But be that as it may, I live in Mthatha now. I practice there as a psychologist, both at my practice and at the institution's counseling division, the university there, and a senior doctoral candidate in Cape Town. And I suppose what takes up my time apart from office and therapy work would be the book work. So the book is You Okay, but the stuff that happened to you wasn't. And the PhD is in ECD, so early childhood development. So that's my life work. This is my rent to society. Early childhood development. As a Tsomo born, you can understand that the scripting of my schooling has informed what I understand to be the disparities in the schooling system, having moved from Tsomo, then PE, then now UCT. So that's what the doctorate is. It is studying rural contexts and villages and taking stuff that is already there and create it for stimulation and IQ opportunities. So inbuild what is already there into the curriculum. So that's what the PhD does. And then I tried to erect one as well, so build an actual ECD, and then that needed money, so I wrote a book.
Yes.
So ultimately, that is what I do. I think psychology funds it. I think psychology teaches me a lot about learning and how people learn. And I design those solutions, and yeah, that is who I am, and that is what I do.
It's a beautiful story,
Thank
especially
you.
because I was going to ask you what led to you going into the direction of early childhood development in terms of your PhD, but you've just explained it,
Yeah.
and it talks to your rootedness, right? And coming from
Absolutely.
Eslali
Absolutely.
in Transkei.
Yeah.
Andisa, over to you. I like to tease Andisa about the fact that she was the PA to the current president at some point in her life.
Many moons ago.
Many moons ago, many moons ago. Yeah, tell us about your story. How did your journey come? I know you come from PE. You were born in PE, raised in PE, grew up in PE. But what took you to Joburg, and what has been your impact in the space of fintech?
I think before I get into that, I just want to recognize the wisdom that's in the room. I sat up on the other end of the room and I looked around and I thought, my goodness, am I in the right space this morning? So thank you for showing up. Andisa is a catalyst, a storyteller, and a connector. Growing up, I've always loved the adventure of solving stuff. And when I was little, that was solving puzzles. And I've grown up and I've kind of, I think, used all my experiences over the years to always be building something. So I'm always building a bridge to the next thing. I am an outlier. I think corporate isn't designed for folks like me. And so I've always been in the outlying space. But I enjoy, I think, the art of connecting people. I enjoy the art of building things, which I think is why I've always built stuff. And I build them and I let them go. Because I think to a point, sometimes if you hold on to things for too long, they stifle your growth. And so I operate from that place. I moved to Johannesburg because whilst I love Port Elizabeth and Gqeberha for what it is, it was an environment that didn't mirror my ambitions. And I had to come to an environment that would create space for me to explore what those ambitions were.
Yeah.
And I found EPE, while it molded me, I came here at the tender age of 21, worked in Cyril's office from the age of 22. So I was young, very wet behind the ears, but highly ambitious. And I just found that Joburg as a city and an epicenter of the country was a space where those ambitions could be realized. And so that was the draw card, I think, to come to Johannesburg, to accept, I think, the fullness and the greatness of who I can become. And it's allowed me to do that. It's allowed, for me to explore many forms of my expressions, right? Whether from a very creative space, whether from a very commercial space, whether from a very philanthropic space. And so I've got an appreciation for Joburg from that perspective.
Yeah, allowing your creative space, or allowing you to be fully you.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah, to express all that you have to offer. Thank you for that. Hetty, our South African #1 monetization expert, can you tell us about who you are, where you're from, and what's your impact in the current space that you are in of monetizing and converting ideas into revenue streams?
Yes, so I'm Hetty, the entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur through and through. Entrepreneurship, I think, just kind of runs through my veins. I studied political science at the University of Pretoria, and I followed kind of the typical steps that one would. You go to university, you get a degree. I worked at a merchant bank in Sandton. I was earning well, and I really believed that I was on the path that all of us are meant to be on. But then one day I woke up and I thought to myself, I'm spending 80% of my life in the office. So in as much as I'm earning well, I'm actually not enjoying the fruits of my labor. And that's when I began to study, but how do the rich make money?
Yeah.
How do people earn multiple streams of income? Exactly. I started attending events like this, business seminars and conferences, and really discovered that the way to earn money is through business and generating other revenue streams. And so I started a business with my husband, a retail business, P&H Boutique, and we were able to grow it to have 7 retail stores across South Africa. And then COVID hit. And all of a sudden, our retail stores are closed, and what I deemed to be success was no longer in front of me. And then it begged the question, Hetty, if time and money were not a factor, what would you actually be doing with your life?
Wow.
And that's when I realized that I love to help people grow their businesses, but most importantly, make money out of that. And that's where my monetization career then grew from there.
Thank you. Such a mouthful story and a beautiful one to tell. Coming to Zianda, how can women develop resilience and self-confidence to amplify their influence in professional and personal spheres, especially in environments where they may face discrimination or bias?
Oh, okay. I think, Noms, the most basic but so impactful is to always legitimize your competence, right? Because when people weather adversity, you'll see that they were sort of thrust into the same circumstances, but the outcomes weren't the same for everyone. So how was the one who made it out made? What was weaved into their being that made them have fortitude in the face of adversity, that made them land on their feet? And you'd see that they were just a vast human being with a vast coping basket. So to regularly contribute, even when the weather is great, to your coping basket, whether it's gym, whether it's faith, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a spouse, whatever it is, but the more resourced you are in where to go and reach in times of, you can't have one, So to make your coping resource basket versatile is how you cultivate resilience. But if you want to oppose bias, you want to be legitimate, There is that quote that I love so much, that facts are stubborn things. And whatever may be your wishes and inclinations, they cannot dispute the state of evidence. You cannot dispute a qualification.
Yeah.
You cannot dispute a portfolio of evidence. You cannot dispute log hours. Work that was put in is work that was put in, you know, and adversity doesn't undo it. So how you make yourself resilient in spaces that may dump you down, because these things are thoughts, biases are perceptions and thoughts, and how you always dispute thoughts and fickle things is evidence, but what do the facts say? And the facts will speak for you.
For itself.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if you are going back and reminding yourself that, you know, before getting to the stage that you are at, faced with, you know, challenges, but you need to remember that this is not the first time you are faced with similar challenges.
And sometimes you need those facts even for yourself.
Yes, for yourself.
You know,
Actually.
even your own voice will say, hey, because we are novices and then we're at the peak and then novice of something else, when you're back to novelty, those doubts come back, that insecurity comes back, and facts speak for you.
You are right.
That when you think I can't, facts say, but you can. The degree is literally accredited. It says you can. You know?
And it's legit. You're reminding me of my journey recently where I said to my husband, I started to question myself as we are taking the business to new frontiers, right? It's been 8 years now having started the business, and we are now at our growth phase peak. And I said to him, I wonder if I am the right CEO to take this business from these 8 years going forward. I wonder if we should not appoint another MD. Maybe I'm really not the right person. He actually grounded me and made me remember that you are at an advantage now because you've got resources, right? You've got a base. Remember 8 years ago, there were no resources, there was no base, there was no employees, there was no systems. So we often forget, we really do forget. So it's good to have that basket of, you know, wisdom that you can always tap into that's going to ground and remind you of where you come from. So thank you for that. So tell me, in your own experience, still on you, Zianda, in your own experience, what are some of the common psychological barriers that women hold or that hold women back from asserting their influence, and how can these be overcome?
You know, I thought about this a lot when you and I spoke about why this theme, and you really were pitching it at actualization, that yeah, success is great, progress is great, but I'm really, as in this last installment, pitching it at the pinnacle of what you can actualize of your potential, so really beyond boundaries. And I sat and thought, by the nature of social animals that humans are, cohorts and groups and plentiness is where we find security and is where we find comfort. And you're saying to people, push it beyond boundaries, you're asking for deviation. You're saying, deviate from what is considered normal. And if you are fair and honest about society, then you should also be honest about how society treats deviation and how it responds to a pedestal exhibited in your face.
It's not
person.
kind.
And the most common prohibition, when someone is like, I know I'm great, but maybe keep it here, is usually the fear of, if you've lived long enough, you haven't lived a perfect life. If you've lived long enough, you've tried something for a fit and it was a misfit, and you took it off. So there's stuff you would prefer not to show. So if you are now saying, I'm going to make myself visible, ultimately the cost is you easy for the picking, and the higher you go, the dirtier the game becomes. So a lot of prohibition is from a safety perspective. That thrusting myself into the spotlight is risky business. There's the diagnosis, there's the infidelity, there's the bribery, there is the this, and I don't know if I want it at that cost. So that's the most common psychological barrier, that it's just a costly exercise to deviate from the normal. People don't respond well to that deviation, and they punish you vehemently for attempting to do something that has not been done. So that's the most common psychological barrier. The most obvious one is imposter syndrome. But another very subtle one is not having a roadmap. That's why people don't. Because when we ideate the complete version of your idea. So you know you have potential. You know what it looks like when it has been actualized. So a lot of people know to the T their vision. They can even sort of visualize the sound of their high heels in the corridor of their high-rise building. You know. But the psychological barrier is like, yes, I know my IQ, I know my aptitude, And I know what it looks like when it's complete, but this vast space of emptiness, and where to from here? And sometimes that gap is just too wide, and the barrier is not believing I can make the leap, and I will survive the fall if a fall happens. So it's amongst those plenty, but that's what I will mention. Visibility and its cost, imposter syndrome and insecurity, but ultimately lacking at GPS of what to do with the space of emptiness to get where it is you are hungering to go.
Wow. Can we give a hand of applause for that, guys? What a powerful response, and thank you for that, Zianda. Hetty, over to you, our monetization coach expert. What are some of the effective strategies for women to monetize their expertise and personal brands, particularly in industries where they are underrepresented or misrepresented?
Sure. For me, I think one of the first things that I always speak to women about, especially women that look like us and come from environments like us, is actually understanding what it means to monetize and the fact that they can do it. We are often taught about only one way of being able to generate an income. All of us are on social media, all of us are in the online space, all of us have got gifts and talents that were assigned to us at birth. But many of us do not know, how do I take that gift and talent and actually be able to earn an income and a revenue from it? And so for me, one of the greatest things that I want to be able to encourage women is actually to be able to say that going beyond boundaries means going beyond the mindset of the environments that we were brought up in, that taught us that there is only one way to exist in this world. And to say that instead of taking the textbook route of how to build a career, a business, and an income, you actually have agency to paint a picture on a blank canvas. When I was in corporate, I thought that I had reached the pinnacle. And then I became an entrepreneur and realized, my goodness, I actually have the ability to design my own life. On my way here, I was chatting to my friend and I said to her, I'm planning to travel to Ghana in August, and I think I'm just going to spend an entire month there. Because the whole point of being a digital entrepreneur is that I should be able to earn money on a mountaintop. Yeah. And so for me, one of the greatest things that I really want to impart to you, I want you to soak it into the depths of your esophagus. It is to say that your gifts will make room for you. And they can be able to pay you because it is yours and it was assigned to you at birth.
I love that. I love that, guys. So can you please share with us examples of successful marketing tactics that have helped women, entrepreneurs and professionals to amplify their influence?
Absolutely. In fact, let me just give you an example of a client of mine. She's a medical doctor. And at the time at which she came to our agency, she said, Hetty, I've studied for all of these years. I know how to treat my patients, but nobody ever taught me how to get patients to walk through the door. Yeah. They first need to walk through the door before I can treat them. How do I get them to walk into the door? Then we began to look at various marketing strategies, and it was tough. Because first of all, within her industry, they're not allowed to blatantly advertise. Doctors cannot put up billboards. They can't do any of those things. So I said to her, but over and above a doctor, you're a human. And you are a person, which means we can build your personal brand. Let us put you in the public domain and leverage your personal brand as the funnel to your practice. So now she's speaking on stages, sharing her knowledge. She's got a book. She's about to sign a television program. And through the influence of her personal brand, her practice is full, and she's actually employed locums to work within her practice. Fantastic. Her gift is making room for her.
Actually, it feels like her gifts are making room for her talent.
Yes.
So her talent is her being a medical doctor.
Yes.
But the gift is that I'm able to step into a room and speak about my talent so that people are able to be attracted to the work that I do and actually pay me for the work that I do.
In a manner that influences them positively.
I love that. Truly, truly love that. Andisa, over to you. How can organizations in the tech space and fintech in particular foster a culture of diversity and inclusion that not only attracts but also retain top female talent? Because we know in South Africa that, in fact, a study that was done in 2019-2020, it indicated that out of, there were 277 companies listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange that don't have women representation. So I ask myself, with an influx of education, undergrads, coming into the stream of our professional, environments, where are the women? What is happening to them? We seem not to be reaching somewhere senior, top, executive level boardrooms, let alone sitting as board members. So how does organizations then foster that culture to include women in such an environment?
I think we need to challenge conventional wisdom and accept that as women we've had to assimilate into the workspace. The workplace was built around the construct that dad goes to work 9 to 5, mom stays at home to look after the children. And what's happened in the journey of empowering women is that we've tried to assimilate, right, to that structure and to, I think, what men can do. And so for those of us who've got children, right, the priority is always going to be your children, right? And yet the pageantry of the workplace requires you to perform in a manner that is unfamiliar to you, right? The core and the crux of who you are as a woman. And I think the beauty, and I said it, alluded to it earlier, and I said the corporate SA just wasn't a fit for me. Because I wanted the balancing act of, I aspire to be a C-suite executive, but it is grossly important to me to show up as a mom. And it hit me the 1 year I used to travel a lot to the UK. And I was sitting in Heathrow, waiting for my flight, and one of the ladies who was just a random cleaner said to me, "Oh, no homework today." Because my now 16-year-old, I used to sit and do homework on Skype with Ati. And she had seen me so many times constantly doing homework and checking in before my evening flight to try and make it home on time. That was the reference. It wasn't that I was a high-flying executive. It wasn't that I was anything. I was this poor mom who's doing homework on Skype on the floors of Heathrow Airport. And so when I say we need to challenge, traditional wisdom, and I think this is where the fintech space, or rather startups, are changing the construct of work. Right? Like in my business, I don't want people setting up meetings between 2 and 3 in the afternoon because the au pair drops off my boys at 2 when they don't have extramurals. Between 2 and 3, that's my power hour to check in with them. I make them pancakes or whatever after school thing. I check homework very quickly. That is critical for me. And so if you want me to show up at the best female version of myself, I need those allowances. And the traditional spaces don't allow for that, right? Because there's that pageantry, there's the hybrid, but we promote the people who are at the office. Because when you want to dial in from home, you think when you are the VIP of the workplace, right? And I know this, in fact, my ex-colleague who's sitting right there in the corner was part of our struggle because we're both parents. And, the firm we worked at, had this anecdote that the people who are promoted in the firm are the people who are constantly at the office. So it didn't matter that we were doing our jobs. It didn't matter that we were shooting the lights out. The construct is, it's that visibility, right? And there's that pageantry of being at the water cooler, like, "Hey, John, how's it?" Like, and like, it's a good time, right? But the question is, are we working, right? And so when I say I think we need to challenge that conventional wisdom is, what is the design of the workplace? And is it truly inclusive outside of these buzzwords that we all have, right? Because I do think we've also fallen into this rabbit hole of these wonderful buzz. They sound very sexy, guys, right? Like cough, right? They just are like, they're here, right? And we all have these acronyms for stuff. But I think if you look at the etymology, which is the, the Greek, definition and meaning of some of these words, like what is it truly? So in our business, from a tech perspective, I don't ascribe to a traditional, give me a resume and you've got a what in technology. Because there are some skills that you can test for competence outside of that piece of paper. Right? You can check for those things. And so in a building environment like technology, I mean, the life cycle is fundamentally different. So from stuff that we ideate to pre-production, to writing code, to piloting and testing it, checking for bugs, there's not a clear science to technology. There never has been. But somewhere, somehow, I think when technology kind of really took over, we raised the barriers of entry to the detriment of humanity, never mind women. Because black boys have the same challenge. I'm raising 2 black boys. I worry about when they leave school, what are those opportunities look like? And the reason for that, and those of us who are parents in this room, is because we have these kids who go and study these wonderful degrees. At every major intersection, there's a child with a post-grad degree who doesn't have a job.
Yeah.
And so it begs the question, those of us who are in the steering of the wheel, what are we doing to create a bridge, right, that fosters what inclusivity means? By no means am I saying let's drop the standard, right? Because I'm attracted to excellence. Excellence is a value. But how do we deconstruct what that notion is of coming into the workplace?
Yeah, that's very powerful. It actually builds me to the next question around, is corporate South Africa, right, ready for the future world of work as it's deemed? And is it ready for the inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging? I mean, these are the buzzwords that you're talking about. These are what are the themes and values of most organizations in South Africa. But are we really living it? Are we ready? Is corporate South Africa ready? But another opposite question to that is, as employees of corporate, are we ready for that transition too? Because we can be here and call on corporate South Africa to make all these changes and adjust to all the ways that we would be included, right? But are we ready, and do we want to be included? So how do you gauge the readiness on both parties?
I think we underestimate how paternalistic South African employers are. If COVID has taught us anything, is that we've gone and we reverse engineer what should have been the point of inflection and the shift, right? COVID said, look, the quality and the value of a human life far supersedes, commercial outcomes. So let's create space, let's get people to not cross-contaminate, stay at home, work from home, right? And then when the veil of secrecy got lifted, and it was right back to normal. We're filling up flights, it's bums on seats. And then you ask the question, because most organizations, I think outside of the front-facing, and I think the retail sector and a few others that needed to be on the front lines, right? Knowledge workers, you should still be able to be fully functional in your job, working from anywhere. And yet we see more and more corporate companies have a call back to people to come back to work. And sure, the flip side of the coin is, sure, there's a real estate, massive thing, right? Companies have entered into 20-year leases, they can't get out of it, so then we need to justify the cost. So when we look at the P&L, it must make sense. Can't walk into the office and we're paying 30 million as Discovery, right, on the corner of Stanton Drive, and there's 10 people in the office. But there's a 20 million rand bill every month. And that's why I say I think we really underestimate the paternalism. How can we change it? Again, challenge conventional wisdom. And so we've evolved, and yet we keep resisting the change. And I think that's why I find it interesting, because we've gone from fully work from home, and then we're going to be hybrid. Oh, my personal new favorite. 3 days a week, I'm like, guys, hybrid didn't work. Why would 3 days a week all of a sudden, randomly work with the same subset groups of people? And so I think until the old boys club, whose ascension to power looked fundamentally different, right? Like when we got into corporate 20 years ago, if you wanted to be the boss, you walk in and you had your foot soldiers fill up the open plan, right? And you knew you've arrived. And then you had your corner office and your PA right outside the office. And you're like, I know Kaiser keep. I like we're here. Do you know what I mean? And now I think the construct of hybrid, people who still yearn for power and control, they don't know how to manage resources in this ambiguous world. And so I think until we shift those mental models to reflect the society in which we live in today, I think South Africa particularly continues to be behind this particular curve, not all curves, this particular curve.
Don't you think technology has a big role to play, right? In terms of the availability of technology and the adoption of technology and embracing of technology within corporate South Africa. And I'm saying this because I was stunned to, I think there was an interview that was done by one of the radio shows, and we all know that we are in a water crisis. And I was stunned to, to believe that Rand Water has not adopted technology. And this is partially the reason why we are where we are today, right? And I ask myself, we've been talking about technology, and now you are in the technology space, right? Are we embracing technology to its full potential? Because at this point in time, we are seeing the results of corporates that have not adopted technology, and that's why we are in water crisis. Because apparently they still measure the water, what do you call it, the water levels and whatnot with a calculator and a spreadsheet. And I'm like, guys, it's 2024. I mean, and then now they are talking about the triple Ps in the industry, in the water industry, where an entrepreneur like Noma that is interested to chow the government's money, I will go in and say I can do this because I've got the technology, or I've embraced technology, or I can partner with a technology partner that's sitting in the global continent and actually put in a stick and be able to calculate and measure the water levels. Where are we when it comes to technology? And I mean, you advocating for technology in terms of the fintech space as well.
So I think Africa as a continent is quite unique. So if you look at technological advance from first world countries, right, like our tech appetite has grown in leaps. So where everywhere else, where people started on desktops, and then they moved into laptops and then smartphones, Africa came right into phones, right? Like by and large. So if you look at market penetration. And so what that tells us is that us as Africans, we're hungry for it and we want more. I think deal brokerage at the highest level has a lot of political influence. And it's a conversation we don't have enough. So to your point, right, around like a Rand Water, and I think there's a few of the other parastatals, where it's taken them eons, right? If you look at our energy regulation, right, in the country, against the construct of a Kenya or I had a chat with the CEO of M-Pesa the other day. Not M-Pesa, Mkopa. He ran M-Pesa for a long time. He moved to Kenya, started a company called Mkopa. And it is essentially being able to buy electricity just from your phone, and you power up your house. But because regulation there is, it's a different free market. And so I think there are macroeconomic issues that are at play. I think there's a political inference. I think there are those who need to get the lion's share of things. And it is these particular individuals that are holding us hostage. Because I know I've spoken to a few people in the room, and I see some familiar faces. So we're having these conversations, right? So where is it going wrong? You have platforms such as, whether it's a company I work for, and there's a few others in the tech startup and fintech. So we keep building these things. And sometimes what happens, depending on who's building what, a blue chip company comes and wants to buy us out, and then they swallow the innovation. And we've had a few offers from two banks, and we said no, on the premise that we've built a social impact initiative. And God forbid, whatever one of these two banks take it in, and then they'll use the infrastructure, right, that we've built for something else, but then they'll swallow the innovation and the social impact. And so it's a tough one to call, because again, there are so many moving pieces. I am encouraged, though, I think, by how many people and how many of these platforms keep mushrooming. And for me, that's also indicative of the fact that there's so many of us who want to make sustainable changes, right? And so there's the appetite for that, right? Like we have millions of, users on our platform because people want the benefit of it. But then, is there an endpoint, right? Like, so from a macroeconomics perspective, what's the conversation we need to be having? Because at a grassroots level, like every day I get invited to speak at these things and I come across like young men or young girls who are building tech platforms. So it's not difficult. If you know what you're doing, it really is not difficult to build a platform. You just have to know what you're doing. But how do you scale? And, are the larger structures then the real inhibitors to that scale? Yeah. And those are the questions we have to, carefully ask
continuously asking ourselves. Yeah, thank you for that. In closing, Ziyanda, in your opinion, how can organizations create supportive environments, right, that prioritize the mental health issue and well-being of women and ultimately fostering confidence and influence in women in particular?
Oh, thank you, Noma. I think
in the heart of Africa's vibrant business landscape, there's a force driving change, innovation, and growth. Introducing Ziyana Group, a beacon of bespoke professional services, pioneering the future of business solutions and technology across the continent. At Ziyana Group, we are more than just consultants. We're partners in progress. Our ethos, people-centered, solutions-driven, and technology-inclined. With our cutting-edge AI-powered HR digital technology and a commitment to customer success, we empower organizations to unlock the unlimited potential of their people and optimize operational processes. In a rapidly evolving work landscape where talent is seeking control and new concepts like fractional talent are emerging, Ziyana Group stands ready to navigate the challenges and seize the opportunities. Rooted in sub-Saharan Africa with a strong presence across multiple countries including Kenya, Nigeria, Mozambique, and more, Ziyana Group is dedicated to driving superior business performance across the region. Join us in shaping the future of African business. Ziyana Group, empowering the future of African business.
just as a general construct, it's very difficult to hold people accountable if they transgress to a rule that does not exist. So yes, it's a microaggression, yes, somebody experienced it, but if there's no formal rule that holds them accountable to this deviation cannot then, be held into account. So it has to be in policy. What are your promotion or even recruitment policies say about equity and inclusion and about representation? So I think from an organizational standpoint, to create that is to make it concrete and tangible by enforcing it. Because there will be gender diversity trainings and all of those things, but they're not mandatory. So if this then cannot be enforced, so I think an organization has that power, one, to make a gender conversation mandatory, to make improvement of the corridor conversation and vocabulary mandatory, but most importantly, in order to hold transgressions into account, it has to exist in policy. Yes, an occupational practice that is representative of evidence and social research that is happening now, continuously being updated. And if your occupational practices represent that, then I think you're on the right track.
Thank you for that. So tell us about your book. You're okay, but everything that happened to you wasn't. So tell us about your book and how can we get hold of your book?
Okay. So the title is "You're Okay, but the stuff that happened to you wasn't," and broadly really an extension of my psychotherapy work. Because not everybody has the financial weight to pursue psychotherapy long time. And for some people, it's not even a preference. right? But even if it is a preference, sustaining it longitudinally is not a thing most people can achieve. And it was really born from out of one, if they did come, what is the culmination of contemporary and classical psychology tools that you can package and a person can have long-term and they're not bound to an obligation to continuously come here. And the goal of therapy always is to journey a person back to that pure place that is a starting point for all of us. Because we are scripted in experience. And then they don't script the same thing for all of us. So that's why it says, but the stuff that happened wasn't. Loss and death for someone else, sexual assault for someone else, upbringing and just violent weaving of damaging messages into your development. It's different for all of us in severity and in scale. But it's a chapter by chapter unpacking these things that are not okay. How did they come to be? And it was born from an appetite to know that you don't just wake up problematic. Like, people don't just wake up maladaptive for no reason. A lot of things are born out of a response to necessity, and you develop a couple of strategies to deal with that circumstance, but a lot of us are using them beyond their original intention. So yes, aggression may work if you live in a township and you are not trying to be a target for crime, but it doesn't work in a marriage and it doesn't work in running an organization. And many examples like that. So the book packages those things to say, hey, would you perhaps consider that you are not defective or broken, even if the picture looks like it is so, and begin to unpack chapter by chapter, where did it go wrong and who is responsible? And if it's not irreversible, how do you ascribe a different meaning to it? That yes, it is your story, yes, it isn't going to change, but how do you make it partial? Because the beginning phases of your story aren't up to you, but if you were to take the pen and author, like now, that, okay, mom and dad, I got it from here, okay, poverty, I got it from here, what would you script? And yeah, so basically a psychological toolkit that does that in a number of different ways, leaning on psychology theories, to journey you back to a place of knowing that you are okay and unwearing whatever scripting may have made you believe that you are not okay. So a separation between people and behavior. Yeah. Your behaviors aren't okay, the ones you do or the ones that were done to you, but you, your personhood, isn't okay, is okay. And once you believe this, you begin to interact with the world from a place of understanding that and searching outcomes that match this. Wow. So ultimately, that is what it is. And secondly, it was a fundraising capital, like I said. I self-published it because I needed money to build the ECD. So it is self-published, it's sold on my website, it retails for $250, and I did bring a few copies today.
Oh, guys, can we support and give a round of applause to Zianda for the exceptional work that she's doing in the clinical psychology space, and for the contributions that you've made. I mean, it's not easy to actually stay in back home in Transkei, where you know that you can step out, you know, but you've chosen that you've made a choice that this is where I want to plant and this is where I want to give back, so that your efforts and contributions are valued in a magnitude manner. So thank you for all of the work that you do.
It's my pleasure.
Hetty, in your experience in closing, how can women overcome the fear of self-promotion and confidently advocate for the value they bring to the table, both personally and professionally?
Sure. That's a really big one. Often at times I find that with the different clients that we deal with, the men I find are a lot more outspoken in speaking about their value, what they bring to the table, and what makes them so incredible and awesome. And when we deal with women, whether it's with entrepreneurship or their personal brands, they're a lot more humble and they are a lot more timid. Even in business, women definitely tend to underprice more than men. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because we've been taught as women to really promote likability. And so we would prefer to be liked than to charge correctly. We would prefer to be liked than to actually get that promotion, because we are very fearful, particularly as black women, as being labeled as the angry black woman. And so for me, one of the things that I am learning to do is to trade within my mind the desire to be liked and rather to replace it with being undeniable.
Wow. Wow, guys. That's brilliant.
And what that in essence means is that within your career, within your business or your life, whether you like me or not, it's undeniable that I'm good at what I do.
Yes, guys, yes.
And the moment that you begin to show up in the world with that heart and body posture, your value becomes undeniable.
Wow.
And that, for me, I feel is something very powerful that all of us should claim.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. In closing, also to you, Andisa, what can women do to amplify their influence? I think this is the final question from me. What can we do to amplify, our influence in the spaces that we occupy, right? Whether you are an entrepreneur, social impact entrepreneur, corporate leader, but what is it that we can do? What are the tangible things that we can advise everyone here?
I think to echo Hetty's sentiment, first things first, nyusa volume.
Yes, amplify your influence, guys.
Nyusa volume. Like the volume must be astronomical, but it must be accompanied with competence, which is what she said, right? So people must think of you, they must be like, yeah, if we end yes, she's gonna kill it. Uzaba loud, because I'm loud, but she's gonna kill it. So first things first, nyusa volume. Don't be afraid of your own shadow. There's something I think, and maybe it is the unintended consequence of femininity that requires us, you tutor yourself. What's the word in English? It's Saturday, guys. To minimize, there we go. Sorry, my English escaped me there for a minute. And to reduce yourself, right? And so you see your shadow. And I think some of us on the panel, we're still guilty of it. There's days I get introduced, I'm like, yo, they talk about me. Oh, it's my turn to come up. And there's a thing in my subconscious that I must always constantly go, no, that's you. Go it. They're talking about you. And so I think you, Hetty, articulated it so well. I've worked in HR for many years. And it's what men are good at, right? And it is and I think it's part of the bro code, right? Is to demonstrate competence before you know competence is there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they do it so well. I marvel at it, right? I don't know if you've been in meetings and you're like, oh, Jonathan, how did he get this job? Like, this guy's here, right? Because the slick thing they do, those of us who work in corporate, you've experienced this, right? You say something in your timid little voice, Shem, ne? And then Jonah doubles down and resays it. And then about Mike, they're like, yeah, Jonah. You're like, I just said it. So you see why I say, nyusa volume. Because they're not saying something fundamentally different from you. They're not saying something smarter. They've just learned to raise the volume. They've just learned to kind of go, no, I'm competent. And so we need to learn how to advocate for ourselves and do it well. A lot of us tend to outsource this to somebody else. No, Umganami is going to come and she's going to tell them I'm great. No, why are you waiting for the friend to come? So that's why I said you got to just know where the speaker is in your situation and you've just got to turn the volume up.
Wow, guys. Wow. Yeah, this is the end. Thank you. This is the end of the women's panel that is sponsored by Media Mix 360, talking about nyusa volume, amplifying your influence in your spaces that you are in. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. We've got questions. We will have questions. Yeah, I know you were a powerful panel. We can't leave you in jail. No. They need to nyusa the volume to you.
The volume is astronomical, Astronomical volume.
Yes. Any questions? Anyone? There's a question there. Any other person for questions? There's a question there. There's a question there. Two more. There's a question. That's it. We've got two this side, and we've got two this side. Thank you so much. You can ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mamkela Dalma Khumalo. I am a leadership and executive coach for Black women in particular. The question I have is for Uzianda, but I also believe that the other speakers can also speak to it. It is a constant theme that comes up with black women particularly, that as you amplify yourself and amplify your voice and your influence, it's lonely at the top. And we get into spaces like this, kube mnandi, sibe cute, and have all of this wisdom, right? But then you go back home and you have no community that elevates you at the time that is necessary to be elevated, or corrects you when it's time to be corrected. So the question then is, how do we build those kind of communities that are outside of women empowerment events, really, that will be sustainable, but also get women to get out of the blockers that they create within themselves and in their minds? Thank you.
Are you going to take us?
Yes, I am going to.
For more from Leaders in Conversation with Noma Zibulo Changa, you can continue listening to the rest of this episode on your audio streaming service app. Our podcast is available on various audio streaming platforms. Details in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.